Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have another recent reads video for you. I've been reading so much recently that I feel like I'm filming these videos all the time. Since I last managed to film one of these videos, I have finished 7 books, so I'm going to be talking about those today, and they're all ones that, all bar one of them, actually I think I'm going to give you a little bit of detail about. So anyway, without further ado, let's get going with them. The first book I'm going to talk about today is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. This is the prequel to The Hate You Give and is set 17 years earlier and follows the life and story of Maverick, who is the father of Star, who is the protagonist in The Hate You Give. This book kind of is the lead up to Star's birth. It explains how Maverick ended up being a teenage father, how he starts to manage looking after the kids in his life, and his trials and tribulations being linked to a drug gang in his town and the reasons why he's involved in that and his kind of attempts to change his life. It was really impactful actually. I did struggle a little bit with Maverick as a narrative voice. I didn't entirely engage with his narration style, which was a little bit different from the way Angie Thomas has written in her other books, and I don't think that was just because it was a male character. I think it was a little bit more written in like the street dialect of his community, and if you watch my channel regularly you know how I feel about dialect, but I mean it was just slightly detracted from the storytelling for me personally, but that is just my opinion. I still think it's a really worthy book to have been written. I'm really glad that I read it. I really do recommend it if you're fans of Angie Thomas's writing. If you like her characters, this was a really great contribution to her work. It gave a lot more insight into the community that she was writing about, and so I found it a really enjoyable book. I did get a little bit frustrated with Maverick as a character at times, but I think that is fairly standard. I could kind of see him. Before I went back to uni, I worked with out-of-work teenagers, often who had not managed to leave school with many qualifications, sometimes who were involved in gangs or drugs, and sometimes who were teenage parents. And he was exactly the type of candidate we would want on our Prince's Trust programme that I used to run. I don't know, maybe that was another reason why I slightly struggled with it, because it felt like my old job. But never mind. I think I also struggled a little bit for a lot of the book to marry up the character I was reading about with the character that we knew in The Hate You Give. I think I hadn't quite registered when I was reading that how young Maverick and Lisa had been when they had Star, and so I think it took me a little bit by surprise, and it was only towards the end of the book that I could start to see the character that I was familiar with from that other book. And maybe if I'd reread The Hate You Give more recently, I would have enjoyed Concrete Rose more. But I did still enjoy it. I still gave it 4 stars and I still would highly recommend it. Yeah, I read it as an ebook from the library. I'm glad I read it in that format. I may buy a copy at some point and I may reread it. I'm not entirely sure at the moment. The next book that I finished was called Feminist Trauma Theologies, which was a collection of essays edited by Karen O'Donnell and Katie Cross. I picked this up for a couple of essays that I was working on for uni, and it was a really, really good book. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. So it was really helpful to a couple of essays that I wrote this year, and there was quite a lot in that was relevant to the research I'm going to be starting in the autumn. I borrowed this as an ebook from the college library. I am going to be trying to get my own copy because I think it's the kind of thing, I don't think I'll sit down and reread the whole book again, but I will return to some of these essays again in the future. Yeah, that was a really, really good book and I gave that one 5 stars. Because it was for uni, I'm not going to talk much more about it than that. The next book that I finished was That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. I've talked in a couple of videos about my tribulations with this book. I really enjoyed it, I'm going to say that. The issue was with the book itself, not the story, if that makes sense. My copy of the Space Trilogy, my copies are all in storage. I should say as well, I was reading this as part of the Space Trilogy read-along hosted by Victoria from A Musical Bookworm. We had really good fun on this read-along. We had a great chat on her Discord about it. The live shows were really, really good, so I'm really glad I took part in that. When we had the live show for Voyage to Venus, Perelandra, which was the second book, they were all saying how much longer the third book was than the second one, and and I looked at my copies, not actually my copies were in storage. I was borrowing my dad's paperback copies, and I looked, and that Hideous strength didn't seem to be too much longer. And then when I started reading it, there was a note at the beginning to say that C.S. Lewis had written an abridged version, so he'd gone through and cut out a lot of the descriptive stuff just to make the book about half the length. And so I was a little bit like, oh well, I didn't really want to read the abridged version because everyone else was reading the full version. So I managed to get an ebook copy of the full version on iBooks, and so I ended up reading that instead, and I'm really glad I read the full version. And now if I ever reread this series, which I probably will because I did really enjoy most of it, I then would have the choice of maybe reading the abridged version for the final one so I could get through it a bit quicker. But this was really good. It had quite a different feel to the first two. So the first two were definitely sci-fi. They both involved a trip to other planets and both focused on the main character of Dr. Ransom, who was making these incredible journeys to other planets. This third book, Ransom was in it, but he didn't appear until probably at least halfway through. It followed two new protagonists, and this is kind of like, he does a similar thing in the Narnia books where he starts with one set of protagonists and then as the books go on he introduces new ones. So this was a similar idea. So this book followed Mark and Jane Studdock, who were a recently married couple who met, I think, through university. So Jane had been doing research but had kind of put it on one side while she adjusted to being a housewife. This book was written, first published I think in 1945, so it was kind of the time where women did tend to give up work when they got married, but she was still planning to carry on with some of her research. And Mark had just become a fellow at a college in fictional town of Edgestowe. What gets the story going is an organisation called NICE have requested to buy a portion of land from the college to build their new headquarters, and while there is some resistance from some factions in the college, it gets the go ahead. Mark gets offered a job at NICE, but when he starts working there he realises things aren't quite what they seem. Meanwhile, Jane has been having strange dreams that she hasn't been able to explain, so she goes to see an old friend, Mrs. Dimble, who suggests she goes and visits another lady called Miss Ironwood. She finds out that her dreams aren't just dreams, they're actually kind of predictions. She's seeing things both as they're happening or that are going to happen, like real things that are happening. The story kind of develops from there. In the first two books there's mention of a group called the Eldils, who are kind of like a spiritual species, so they exist on a different plane of existence. There's kind of a battle for Earth between good Eldils and bad ones. They are working through these different organisations, and so the story is about how, like, the culmination of this battle. The third one I described it as an Agatha Christie Tommy and Tuppence adventure meets 1984 with a bit of fantasy and magic thrown in, and that's kind of what it felt like. It's actually, we had someone in the Discord shared a review that George Orwell wrote of this book, and so you can kind of see the inspiration for 1984 and some of what C.S. Lewis was writing in this book, some of the ideas behind NICE, and we ended up labelling it as a pre-dystopian in that group chat and in the live show, because you could see if NICE were the winners in this situation, you'd end up with a society very much like 1984. So it's kind of, this story is about the battle for the redemption of humanity, but with some magic and some fun and games and some adventure and some very sinister situations and all sorts of other things going on. So I really, really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Similar to Perelandra, there was a bit more mythology and theology stuff thrown into this one, much more so than Out of the Silent Planet. So if you're a fan of C.S. Lewis and the Narnia books, and maybe you've read some of his theological writings, then I would recommend reading the whole series. If you're not entirely sure, then give Out of the Silent Planet a try. I would say, while I enjoyed this third one the most out of the series, Out of the Silent Planet is the most straightforward one to read, particularly if you're new to C.S. Lewis's fiction or you've not read much of his non-fiction. If you've not read much C.S. Lewis at all, if you've read Narnia and you don't know where to go next with C.S. Lewis but you want to read more, give Out of the Silent Planet a try and see how you go, because that is the one that's got like the least, it's the least preachy, I guess. Anywho, I ended up really enjoying the whole series. I'm really glad I finally read the whole series, and I'm sad that I put it off for so long. So I'm glad that I've finally read it now, and so thank you to Victoria for hosting that read-along that got me to finally read them. The next book that I finished was The Fifth Season by Angie Jemisin. This book was sent to me for my birthday last year by my friend Amber from Books of Amber, so thank you very much to Amber for sending me that. I really enjoyed it. My friend Penny picked this one for my TBR and I'm really glad she did. Again, it's one that I've been meaning to get to for ages and I've been putting it off. I didn't know very much about this book going into it. I knew that some of the chapters were written in second person form, which did take a little bit of getting used to, but ultimately was quite enjoyable. I quite enjoyed that as a way of telling the story. I didn't really know much about the story, about the world it was set in or anything like that, because I do tend to go into books without knowing very much. And I think I was expecting it to be science fiction and then it turned out to be fantasy, and quite dystopian fantasy, but it was very enjoyable. So much happened in this book. I thought the storytelling was brilliant. It was told across multiple timelines and multiple perspectives, and the way that those timelines and perspectives came together at the end I thought was just brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to carrying on with this series. I don't really know what else to say about it other than that it was just absolutely amazing. I don't know why it's taken me so long to start reading N.K. Jemisin. I'm really sorry to have been sleeping on that. Everyone in Space Sirens has been telling me for ages how good a writer she is, and they are so right. I feel like she's been getting a lot of hype recently, and it's totally deserved. Her writing was just brilliant. So I really loved that, and I gave it 5 stars without hesitation. It was just, yeah, just the quality of the writing. Like, there were some aspects of the story that I didn't particularly enjoy, but the writing was so good that I couldn't not give it 5 stars. So I'm so intrigued to see where the rest of the series goes, and I just really want to get all the rest of her books and read them all. I will be waiting until I can buy the next book in the series. I did think about getting from the library, but I really want my own copies. So as soon as I have a bit of money in my book budget, that's the plan anyway. If you haven't read N.K. Jemisin yet and you like fantasy, I mean, it's quite hardcore fantasy. It's very dystopian. It's definitely for an adult audience. But if you enjoy fantasy, high fantasy, then it's really good. The next book that I read was A Beautifully Foolish Endeavour by Hank Green. This is the second book in the Carl's duology. Carl's. Make that sound like a name and not like car. Anywho, so this was the second book in the Carl's duology, following on from An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. I had this one out from, they're talking about, because I've been talking about all these books and I haven't had them told up. I actually have this one told up because I've had this out from the library. I haven't taken it back yet. So I only finished it the day before yesterday at time of filming. So the first book in the series follows April May. These giant statues have suddenly appeared all around the world, and she and her friend Andy film her discovering the statue and pretending to interview it, and it goes viral. So she kind of becomes a spokesperson. There's something in that book called The Dream where there's problems to solve, and it's kind of an attempt to bring the whole of humanity together, but then there's also factions that are working against them. This book picks up where the first book left off. It's told from multiple narrative viewpoints. I can't remember with An Absolutely Remarkable Thing whether it's all from April's perspective or whether there's anything from Andy's perspective. This book is told from several perspectives, including Andy, Miranda and Maya, who were all friends of April in the first book. And I don't know how much more I can say without giving away too many spoilers from the first book. But what was really interesting to me was the similarities between this and that Hideous Strength. I could see almost a direct line to it, because this is another book that I would classify as pre-dystopian. If elements in this book went a different way, you could totally see how this would end up being a dystopian society, and what the characters are aiming for is trying to prevent that happening. So in that sense, there are a lot of similarities between this and that Hideous Strength, and it struck me, because I read them quite close together, just how similar these books could be said to be. I don't know if Hank Green has read the Space Trilogy. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I imagine he probably has read dystopian books like 1984. But yeah, this was a really good conclusion to the duology. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I probably would reread the series at some point in the future. I've borrowed both books from the library, so I imagine at some point I will buy them and reread them, because there was quite a lot of gap between reading the first one and reading this one. I'd like to read them again closer together, and I'd maybe remember and pick up more of the elements of what happened. But ultimately I really enjoyed this, really recommend this series. If you like science fiction but with a contemporary flavour, so it's set in a very similar world to ours. It's kind of like an urban fantasy but a sci-fi, if that makes sense. So I mean, is urban sci-fi a category, a genre? If not, it should be, because that's what this is. Like a contemporary sci-fi. It feels very contemporary but with sci-fi elements. I don't really have a lot more to say about it than that, but I really enjoyed this series and I do recommend it. I'm glad I did because I love Hank Green and John Green and their YouTube channel. Big fan of them, so I'm really glad that I enjoyed this. Nearly there. The next book that I finished was Women's Liberation, which was a collection of essays and excerpts and other things put together by Alix Shulman and Hannah Moore. So this was a collection of writings from the 60s, 70s and 80s from the women's liberation movement that was happening across those decades. It was amazing how relevant so much of it still was, and that's kind of why they put this collection together. I think there were about, whatever number I say is going to be wrong because I can't actually remember, but there were definitely around 100, at least 100 essays that were collected together. And I say essays, it's not just essays, it's excerpts from books and chapters from books, magazine articles, pamphlets, all sorts of different written elements from the women's liberation movement. I had an e-arc of this from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. I will be filming a full review of it soon. I have another book that's on a similar theme that I'm partway through, also from NetGalley. So when I finish that one, I'm going to do a double review of those two books and I'll go into a bit more detail about it then. But I was just so glad to have all of these great resources. I probably will end up buying a hard copy of the finished book because at the end of the arc it had a list of illustrations and they weren't included in the e-arc that I had, which was quite sad. On one level I want to get the book so that I have that, also so I have this great resource library of all these brilliant essays and excerpts and other things so that I can track down some of the books where the excerpts are from longer works, if I can track down the longer works to help me read more like old school feminist stuff. But some of it will be useful in the research I'm going to be doing starting in the autumn, so again from that perspective it will be really useful for me. And I'm not going to say much more about it than that today because, as I say, that review will be coming soon. I only finished this yesterday, so I still have a lot of thoughts to work through, and some of it I ended up having to read quite quickly because I really wanted to get it finished so I could get the review done. I would love to have a hard copy of this so that I can go back and reread portions of it at my leisure, really. But yeah, if you are interested in the history of the feminist movement, particularly in that era, what was really great about this book was that it showed how intersectional that movement was as well, and recovered a lot of voices of marginalised groups within the women's movement that have kind of often been overlooked from that movement. Yeah, so I'm not going to say any more about that for now. I gave the collection as a whole 4 stars, and most of it I really loved. There were just, in a collection that big, there are going to be some things that you don't like as much as others, and that just is what brought the rating down a little bit for me. But more on that to come in an upcoming review. And then the final book that I am going to talk about today is Paddington at Large, which is the 5th book in the Paddington Bear series by Michael Bond. Yeah, I wanted to try and fit one more book before filming this video. It's just been a little while since I read a Paddington book, so I picked these up. I'm working through the series. I read some of them when I was a kid, but not all of them, and I can't remember which ones, so I'm just rereading them all. I have also got the old school TV series on DVD, so I've watched all of them, so most of these stories are familiar to me. And I hadn't realised, but my favourite ever Paddington Bear story is in this book, which is when Paddington goes on a TV game show and challenges their idea of what correct means. I just really love Paddington Bear. He is just such a feel-good character, and if you just need a little bit of a happiness injection, then Paddington Bear is the way forward, I believe, although I'm not a fan of the films. The recent films, I think, just have lost the heart a little bit. I've only seen the first one, but in the books there's no threat. Paddington gets into scrapes, but he's never in any real danger, and what I found upsetting about the films was that Paddington was in real danger, and that wasn't okay for me. So I much prefer the books, the old TV series, which are very definitely based on the books in the stories in the books, and stick quite closely to those for the real Paddington. I don't recommend the films, but I do recommend the books and the old TV series if you need just a little bit of happiness. I know I'm biased on that, but that's my opinion. Anywho, that is all the books I'm going to talk about today. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know some of what you've been reading recently, or if you would just like to let me know that you've been here and you can't think of anything specific to say, then leave me a bear emoji in honour of Paddington Bear. You can also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already. And also please do follow me on my social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!